I would like to now introduce Dr. Mike Allen, New Zealand's Special Envoy for Renewable Energy. Dr. Allen, please take the stage.
Thank you very much. 3 years on from the first Pacific Energy Forum, I'm privileged to have the opportunity to facilitate this panel. The 2013 Forum is, as we've heard, an success in building coordination among donors to accelerate our ability to offer practical and near-term regional energy solutions, set it apart from many other forums. And as I travel around the world, there are many regions who are keen for a similar forum to be held in their region. As we begin the deliberations within this 2016 conference, it's with a level of satisfaction, as we've heard, that we can look back at what's happened in just 3 years. Clearly, this didn't happen in isolation from earlier and ongoing efforts by many players and donors across the Pacific, and as the Minister and the Commissioner have mentioned, there is still much to be done. But what we do all recognise is that energy in the Pacific is undergoing a major transformation. There's a shift to sustainable energy sources, looking to shed the dependence on fossil fuels, while directing considerable effort at increasing energy access for all communities. As we know, this is part of a global transformation that we all need to see occur. A brief review of what has been achieved, but more importantly, understanding the magnitude of what still remains to be done and how this may best be addressed is the focus of this session. Those who are joining me on the panel bring with them first-hand experience of the challenges that have been faced and the solutions that they've adopted to make the progress that we've talked about possible. They've generously offered to share their experiences with you, and after we hear their comments, there will be an opportunity for a brief Q&A. It's my pleasure to welcome from my left the Honourable Aneli Sopoaga, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, the Honourable Siosi Sovalini, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Tonga, where he also holds a number of ministerial roles, including energy, environment and climate change. The Honourable Alfred Jr., Minister of Resources and Development from the Marshall Islands, the Honourable Toki Talangi, the Premier of Niue, and Mr. Philippe Germain, the President of New Caledonia. We're going to speak from the chair, and I hope that this will work well. So, Prime Minister, if I might turn to you first. I understand, as we've heard, that all of the islands supplied by Tuvalu Electricity Corporation now have access to 24 power supply. In addition, the renewable energy generation is increasing with projects underway to install more solar photovoltaic, wind and battery storage systems. And Minister McCulley mentioned it, but I think it's quite remarkable that in 3 years the renewable level in Tuvalu has gone from 4 to almost 43%, I believe, in the generation. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the plans that you and your government have to achieve maybe 100% renewables. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Can I first of all, however, acknowledge the honor and the pleasure that Tuvalu has recently been given in the visit of Their Excellencies, the Foreign Minister of New Zealand and also the Commissioner of the European Union for Development with the visits to Tuvalu, with their delegation, and also to allow us the opportunity not only to play host to their visits, but also certainly to showcase what we have achieved in the area of addressing energy needs in Tuvalu, with the support of the European Union and New Zealand and other development partners as well. Tuvalu greatly appreciates that visit and that support. Thank you. In regards to the specific question, yes, indeed, we have set our targets, but also especially in response to the Paris Agreement requirements for NDCs, for nationally determined contributions to global efforts to reduce greenhouse gases from fossil fuels. So therefore, we are committed, and we have committed by signing and ratifying the Paris Agreement for 100% renewable energy by 2020, 2025, and also on electricity generation to reducing up to 60% of generation to be based on renewable energy by that same time frame. So those are the targets. The targets are ambitious and they are not easy to be achieved. But we are committed to looking at partnerships with development partners, with the European Union, with New Zealand, and Japan, and UAE, United Arab Emirates, and also with the World Bank and other development partners to try to achieve those targets. We know it's difficult, but we are committed to doing that. And as you have heard from the reports in the paper, in the documentation, but also the reports from the Excellencies Ministers, we are doing fine. But this is not to say that it's all done. There is still a lot of gaps that need to be looked at. And I want in particular to stress 3 points. One, there is a need for genuine and durable partnerships. I think that is very, very critical to the success of sustaining these achievements. And I mean durable and genuine partnerships, partnerships that are based on clear mutual understanding of the needs, but perhaps more based on local ownership. Local ownership to be driven by the local communities, by the villages and partners that are involved at national governments, private sector, and NGOs, in particular in Tuvalu, local island councils, because they are there. They are the people who actually implement these things. And partnerships that also recognize the need for budgetary support, but not based on donor recipients model. I think that model is over, is done. We need to ensure sustainable partnerships. We also need to look at, in the area of renewable energies, on issues like waste created out of renewable energy. There is a problem dealing with batteries. Used batteries are littering the islands. We need to have technology to deal with that, and perhaps to look at more efficient battery storage batteries, so that we didn't have to deal with the waste issue. There is also a need on technology and training, capacity training of local people in Tuvalu, and also the other points to reduce the costs of panels and of those appliances to make sure people can afford out of their meager resources. Now, the other point I wanted to raise in response to this question and the need to move forward is that, of course, we need access to financing beyond bilateral, regional, but certainly in order to implement the Paris Agreement, for example, and therefore Green Climate Fund resources is critical. I know there have been proposals from this region for adaptation projects, certainly including Tuvalu's proposal, and certainly I hope that these can be considered at the meeting of the board later this month. But there is also a need for proposals to deal with the mitigation, and that's where energy comes in. And I think it is important that we have these facilities like readiness, but I want to see these as not as a barrier or an obstacle, but also as a facilitator to accessing the real funding for technology and development on energy. And therefore, maybe there is a thought for this readiness facility, not criticizing, but it's just a thought, to be dispersed on the needs, based on the needs of countries, rather than people having to apply again. I think this is critical, but I only put it on the floor as a suggestion. And the final point that I want to say, okay, is related to energy, but climate change in particular. We need to make sure the Paris Agreement enters into force and walk the talk that we as a global community have agreed in Paris. It will be of no use to have an agreement if we didn't ratify it and allow the world to enter this agreement into force so that it can walk the talk. And finally, I'm very, very weary that we are in the Garden of Eden. They say in the Garden of Eden, that's where the sins of humanity started. And certainly I don't want to end up at the end of the day with our sins uncleansed. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed. Perhaps if we could move to Tonga, Deputy Prime Minister, and obviously Tonga's made considerable progress. You've put in 4 megawatts or more of grid-connected renewables, and there are a number of projects underway. I wonder if also you would like to talk about how you see programs moving forward, and also particularly how you see the importance of the private sector for Tonga.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Before I touch on that topic, let me first thank the New Zealand government and the EU for actually convening this very important forum. I think it's about time that we get together again. It's been like going on 4 years, and it's good to stocktake what has been done and where we should be heading. With regards to your questions, Tonga in the last 3 years went from 1% share of renewable energy as having 1% share of the electricity generation to around about 10% now. With that development, it cost us around about $25 million US in the last 3 years, and we're very thankful for New Zealand, JICA, and UAE. Because now we have 3 solar plants, 2 in Tongatapu and 1 in Vava'u. But I guess the main point now is that with our INTC and also in our Tonga Energy Roadmap, our target is 50% by 2020. And so we got about another 40% we need to actually put in place in the next 3 years. So the challenge for us is basically, yes, financing is one of them. But also the capacity and so forth. For example, for the 40%, under our Tonga Energy Roadmap, we have had some discussion with our utility and other partners on what will be the right mix, solar, wind, storage, energy efficiency, to actually get to that ambitious target for Tonga. And the cost that we have right now to actually get to that 50%, is around about 60 million USD, 60 million. But what the government of Tonga don't actually want to do is to actually reallocate some of the resources from some of our other key sectors, such as education, health, agriculture, so that we can meet this target that we set ourselves. So we are willing, and we are actually actively looking at partnership, as the Prime Minister from Tuvalu looking at a sustainable partnership and how we can go about it. And actually having this roadmap, clearly defining what we want, and see what partners, what different roles that the various partners can play so that Tonga can get to that 50%. And one of them, as you rightly mentioned, is engaging the private sector. So it's something that we are looking at, having IPPs, what will be the appropriate PPA, and again, it's something that we're looking to partners, for development partners to actually work with us, to see what will be the right modality, what will be the right mix for Tonga. Because we do believe that energy security, I mean, apart from what the Prime Minister mentioned, the fact that climate change is important, we also consider renewable energy project as not only about mitigation, but also about energy security. The fact that we depend on fuel from somewhere across the world is something that we are very much aware of. So if we reduce our dependency on the fuel, that will increase our energy security. So there are a few dimensions, I guess, there are a few factors that we need to align for us to actually make the most of whatever limited resources that we have, so we can get to that 50%. And it's not, for that 50%, it's not, for Tonga, it's not only about renewable energy, it's also about energy efficiency. And I'd like to actually acknowledge the support, the budget support from EU, focusing on energy efficiency. And at the same time, a lot of what we have done on reducing line losses to around about 10% was primarily due to what the New Zealand government engaged in terms of rebuilding our village network. whereby we focus on modernizing, the lines and so forth. So it's not only about reducing line losses and thereby energy efficiency, but it's also about safety issues. So we are very thankful for New Zealand, and would like to also acknowledge the fact that I do believe that we on the same mindset with New Zealand, because our bilateral assistance with New Zealand, the majority of that bilateral assistance is on energy. So for us to meet that 50%, it's renewable energy and energy efficiency. And if I mention right now, there's an energy ministers meeting back in 2014 in towards setting up a Pacific Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. So that's, an SPC actually got the right to actually set it up, but it will be located in Tonga. What we're working on is to actually, the term of reference for this particular center is looking at engaging private sector, looking at energy efficiency and so forth. And if I may, I'd like to invite the delegates here, especially the ministers and other potential investors, for the opening, which will be in the first week of August in Tonga, on the fringe of the Pacific Power Association meeting. I think I'll leave it at that and maybe elaborate later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Perhaps if we could move on to the Marshall Islands. Minister, your national energy policy sets the framework for your future. I understand that a grid-connected solar PV plant on Majuro is about to be commissioned and that most of the outer islands now have solar home systems. Could you also talk a little bit about comments on the progress and your plans to further reduce the reliance on diesel as you move forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for this very timely question and for bringing up a very important topic of universalizing access to sustainable electricity. However, before I drill into this topic, I wish to express our gratitude to the government of New Zealand through the Honourable Minister, as well as to the European Union through the Commissioner, not only for the invite, but also for the extraordinary effort in bringing together this conference. As you had alluded to, last month, we commissioned a 600 kilowatt peak grid-connected solar PV on Majuro. And I also wish to take this opportunity to thank the United Arab Emirates for making this vision a reality. This project was financed through the Pacific Partnership Fund, and it is thus far the biggest grid-connected project that has been concluded in the Marshall Islands. And through this type of partnership and cooperation, in this case with UAE and the Pacific Partnership Fund, I am confident that the government of RMI, as well as the energy company, will be better positioned to provide adequate supply of electricity at more affordable rates to the entire communities within the capital city of Majuro. The grid-connected solar project represents one of the many solar projects that have been undertaken in the Marshall Islands. Others include the solarization of the entire outer islands, which, when we're speaking of the outer islands, we're talking about more than 1,000 isles and atolls that have been grouped into 27 bigger groups, spread over an exclusive economic zone of nearly 2 million square kilometers. So there is challenge with transportation involved in trying to solarize the entire outer island communities within the Marshall Islands. In any case, thanks. I also wish to give our thanks to European Union for the technical support that they have given toward framing of our national energy policy. And through this policy, our aspiration is to electrify 95% of the outer islands, which at this stage we have already reached even before the target date. So far, local effort to reduce dependence on fossil fuel has been concentrated in solar energy. And another significant solar project that has taken root in the Marshall Islands is the introduction and piloting of electric vehicle, which we are in cooperation with the Honda Group out of Japan. This project basically try to produce a practical EV prototype that can withstand the harsh, salty environment of the Marshall Islands. This project is still in its pilot phase, but has the potential of generating savings of around 1.6 million annually for the government. Now getting back to the national energy policy, this is in fact a policy framework that is premised on providing an improved quality of life for the people of the Marshall Islands through clean, reliable, affordable, and environmentally appropriate energy services. I also should thank the European Union for the technical assistance that has supported the not only the framing, but also the implementation of the national energy policy. And at this stage, we are about to commence revision of the energy policy, and we're also grateful for the support that was provided by the European Union. Mr. Moderator, there's a bit that I will probably touch on later, but thank you for the opportunity to put in a few thoughts and updates from the Republic of the Marshall Islands on this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Turning to Niue, Premier, I wonder, you've started to transform the energy sector. You obviously have a smaller energy sector than many of the other countries, but you've already started to generate about 9% of your electricity, I believe, from renewables. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the challenges ahead and what you've achieved recently.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're looking at about 80% renewable by 2025. That's based on the plan that have been prepared by officials to enable us to think. I think the key at the present moment for Niue is really money. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank the EU for providing assistance, the Japanese for providing assistance, and New Zealand hasn't yet to supply assistance for solar anyway, Murray. So we'd like to sit down with you at the end of this session so that we can discuss how many millions of dollars you're going to be able to give us. But in essence, that's, I mean, the developer, there is no doubts in our minds, and I guess in your minds, that solar power is the way to go. Unfortunately for us, we don't have sufficient wind to get us wind power. Wind power is probably best because of their continuous supply of power. Solar, you got to store it, and one of the challenges for us is to store the solar power. So, but otherwise, that's it. Really. EU, thank you very much for providing more money, hopefully, so that we can take New Zealand. Thank you very much for providing more money, so that we can increase our capacity to increase our solar by 80%. 80% because we don't believe that we can do without power generation using fossil fuels. Unfortunately, that becomes our backup. Therefore, it's 80% by 2025. Thank you very much.
Premier, thank you very much. And for your I'm sure the Minister will appreciate the directness of your request. If we could turn now to New Caledonia, obviously wind, hydro and solar are becoming significant sources of renewables, and I understand producing something like 15% of your country's electricity needs. I understand there are now 6 wind energy sites. Would you like to make some comments, Mr. President, on New Caledonia's progress and the plans to further reduce your reliance on diesel generation? Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. I'm sorry, I will speak French. It's easier for me. Monsieur le ministre des Affaires étrangères, monsieur le représentant de l'Union européenne, mesdames et messieurs, les ministres des territoires du Pacifique. Je vous remercie, bien entendu, de m'avoir invité à cette conférence sur l'énergie dans le Pacifique. Et vous prie, mesdames et messieurs, d'être remerciés pour votre présence aujourd'hui sur le sujet qui nous rassemble, lié au processus que nos pays et territoires d'outre-mer devront mettre en œuvre pour réduire notre consommation, réduire l'émission de gaz à effet de serre et enfin étendre la consommation ou l'accès à la consommation électrique à l'ensemble de nos populations.
Please, I will ask you to excuse me because I will express myself in French. Dear Minister for Foreign Affairs, dear Commissioner from the European Union, dear Ministers from the states and countries of the Pacific, ladies and gentlemen, I would like first to thank you for inviting New Caledonia to attend this conference. And ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to thank you for all being here to attend this conference. As of today, we are going to speak about the processes our respective countries are putting in place in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and expanding the accessibility for our populations to have access to electricity generated by different sources, especially renewable.
Premièrement, je souhaite vous indiquer que la Nouvelle-Calédonie, par l'intermédiaire de la France, va adhérer à l'accord de Paris et prendre ses propres engagements dans l'accord de Paris et par rapport à son schéma de transition énergétique.
First, I would like to recall here that New Caledonia, through France, will commit fully to the Paris Agreement and will also include its own commitments within the Paris Agreement in terms of its energy engagements and commitments.
La Nouvelle-Calédonie doit faire énormément d'efforts puisque nous sommes dépendants à hauteur de 98% de l'importation d'énergie fossile pour l'ensemble de nos besoins énergétiques.
New Caledonia has to make huge efforts as we depend up to 98% on the imports of fossil energy to cover our needs.
Cette dépendance énergétique est principalement liée, comme certains d'entre vous le savent, à notre industrie métallurgique et minière de l'exploitation du nickel qui consomme à elle seule 60% de notre énergie.
This dependency on energy is linked mainly, as most of you know, to both our metallurgy industry and also our mining sector. We have nickel ore that is exploited, and this consumes up to 60% of the total energy consumption.
Donc la production d'énergie par habitant est forte et nous avons en Nouvelle-Calédonie, le 19 mai dernier, décidé au Congrès donc de nous engager via la France, comme je l'ai dit, à l'accord de Paris, et nous avons, nous, au gouvernement, validé les objectifs de diminution de d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre que je vais vous exposer.
So the production of energy per capita is very high in New Caledonia, and on 19th of May, so last month, our Congress, or our Legislative Assembly, decided to, as I said previously, to commit through France to this Paris Agreement. And also for us, as the government of New Caledonia, we have endorsed the objectives in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Nous avons ainsi décidé de réduire d'abord notre consommation de manière générale, réduire de 25% notre consommation. L'énergie la plus propre et la moins chère, c'est déjà celle que nous ne consommons pas. Notre deuxième objectif est de doubler notre production d'énergie renouvelable, ce qui nous permettra d'être autosuffisants en matière de consommation publique, c'est-à-dire de rendre 100% la consommation publique à partir d'énergie renouvelable. Enfin, notre troisième objectif à travers ce schéma que nous avons adopté, c'est de réduire de 37% l'émission de nos gaz à effet de serre.
Therefore, we have diminished our consumption, or our aim is to diminish our consumption by 25%, our energy consumption, of course, and towards the cleanest and less costly energy, because that is the one we don't consume. It's the cleanest that you can get. So we are working towards this main objective. Our second objective is to double our production based on renewable energy and to attain or to achieve self-sufficiency in terms of public consumption. And the final objective would be to reach 100% energy renewable sources. And our third objective, if there is a plan, is to diminish by 37% our emissions of greenhouse gases.
Pour y arriver, nous devrons bien sûr multiplier les fermes solaires, les fermes éoliennes. Nous avons pour objectif également de construire un nouveau barrage hydroélectrique. Il nous faudra pour cela également permettre aux îles qui entourent la Nouvelle-Calédonie, les îles Loyauté, d'avoir une totale indépendance énergétique, notamment par la combustion d'huile de coco ou par l'éolien ou le photovoltaïque.
To achieve these objectives, we need to have more solar and wind farms. Our objective is also to build another hydroelectric dam in New Caledonia. And we would also like to see our loyalty islands, we are an archipelago with many islands around the main island, to achieve total self-sufficiency in those islands, of the loyalty islands, especially based on coconut oil fuel or wind and solar energy.
Mais dans l'actualité, et probablement ce qui nous permettrait d'avoir des objectifs encore plus ambitieux ou de les atteindre plus rapidement, nous étudions depuis maintenant quelques semaines l'opportunité de remplacer une centrale électrique au charbon, au fuel, que nous avons actuellement, qui représente à peu près un quart de la consommation énergétique de la Nouvelle-Calédonie, qui est la centrale électrique de la société SLN, qui est donc la plus grosse entreprise métallurgique de Nouvelle-Calédonie. Et nous allons réouvrir le dossier d'une centrale au gaz.
As of today, as we have probably more ambitious, and we need to have even more ambitious objectives, and that we need to achieve quicker, we are studying how to replace our current fuel-powered station that represents a quarter of our total energy consumption across New Caledonia. And this is the power station that is used by the SLN Société Lunickel company, which is our biggest metallurgical plant in New Caledonia. And so we are wishing to study again the possibility of replacing this fuel-powered station by a gas-powered station.
Donc c'est là un objectif important pour la Nouvelle-Calédonie et j'espère en tout cas que nous arriverons à ce que cette solution, la centrale au gaz, soit une solution économiquement viable pour cette entreprise qui a besoin d'être compétitive au niveau mondial.
It is a very, very important objective for New Caledonia, and I do hope this solution of a gas-powered plant will be retained or chosen, as it will prove more economically viable for this particular company that needs to show and be more present on the international scene and be more competitive.
En conclusion, bien entendu, la Nouvelle-Calédonie souhaite faire tous les efforts nécessaires pour organiser sa transition énergétique vers la consommation d'énergie propre. Pour autant, la Nouvelle-Calédonie est un petit territoire de 270 000 habitants qui, à ce stade, ne bénéficie pas de soutiens internationaux s'agissant du financement de ces énergies renouvelables. Donc elle doit le faire avec ses propres moyens, ce qui effectivement limite nos objectifs ou rallonge les délais nécessaires à tendre vers cet objectif du 100% renouvelable dans la consommation domestique et bien sûr dans un délai un petit peu plus long de ramener également les industries métallurgiques vers des énergies plus propres que le gasoil ou le charbon. Voilà ce que je peux dire à ce stade.
As a conclusion, New Caledonia wishes to put all its necessary efforts towards the organization of its energy transition plan, towards more clean energy, yet we are a very small territory of about 270,000 inhabitants, and at this stage we are not eligible to international supports in terms of funding. So we are relying only on our own resources, which limits quite the scope of our objectives and also extends and even delays the achievement or the possible achievement of these objectives in terms of local consumption of these energy resources. And we're also trying to focus and to bring awareness for our metallurgical industry to turn itself towards cleaner sources of energy rather than relying on coal and fuel sources. Thank you. This is what I wish to share with you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wonder if I could come back to Tonga briefly. I wonder, Deputy Prime Minister, could you comment a little bit about the situation in terms of private sector participation in the market? There's a lot of discussion, I guess, that the private sector needs to come into the region and is an important part of the growth going forward. Could you comment as to perhaps how you see the balance between state and private development in the future and how important that balance will be? I know you've touched on this, but perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on that, please.
Thank you very much. I mean, right now what we're doing actually is actually developing or drafting an energy bill. With the current provision in some of our legislation right now, we can actually go through with having an IPP and looking at it. But you pointed out something I think very important for the state to actually consider, looking at what we can actually put out there like, you know, for an IPP and what should be government owned. We obviously, with the fact that we got another 40% to go in only like 2 or 3 years, IPP, I believe, will play a very critical role in Tonga achieving that target. With regards to the legislation, we are drafting it right now, and we're going to put it to Parliament this year. We do have the appropriate provisions, but I believe after the reviewing it, there are new additional provision to actually set up having some governance and arrangement in place that will help us in actually trying to get to that 50%. And we'll be happy to, if there are any interested investors out there, to have that kind of discussion. But it's definitely going to be in the equation of us actually trying to get to that 50%. And if I may, one of the projects that we're doing with ATP, funded by Australia, EU, and China, is actually renewable energy for the outer islands. And by the completion of this project in about 2 years' time, we're looking at microgrid, looking at solar, home solars, and so forth. By the end of that project, in about 2 to 3 years' time, we'll be closing on 100% accessibility for electricity. So that to me is one of the other, it's not only about renewable, getting that 50%, but providing the access to the people of Tonga. And I think that we should have always remember that it's about, providing that critical services to our people. And one of the other, I guess, if I might as well touch on it, is the fuel. Electricity is a big part of, in terms of using of a fossil fuel, but transportation is a very big part that we are just starting in the Pacific to actually look at how to address it. And one of the interim measures we're looking at is looking at the two oil companies operating in Tonga, whether we can come together in a joint venture and actually have a separate storage system. I know in the Pacific, Samoa and others actually have such an arrangement. But it's not only about having one storage, but also having a big enough storage so we can have an MR tanker coming into Tonga, thereby reducing the transportation cost by up to like 10 cents. So having that reduction too will translate into cheaper fuel for our people. So I believe for a sustainable energy sector, it's not only about renewable, but also looking at other arrangements that can actually help, especially looking at energy security.
Thank you very much, and those are very important topics. Could we just come back briefly to the Marshall Islands? We spoke last night informally about the issues of financing, and when we talk about the projects that are going on, obviously there's a lot of donor contribution, but actually getting communities engaged and some of the self-purchasing that goes on with solar home systems and other things. We discussed the fact that the Development Bank in Palau had a role in that at one stage, and I understand a similar role has been set up in Marshalls. Could you comment on that end of the market and how important you see that for improving the access to those people who haven't got energy at the moment within Marshalls?
Thank you very much, Dr. Allen, for that very important question. Talking about access, and I believe you're talking about access to financing to be able to undertake these type of projects. Unfortunately, there's been that notion that government tend to crowd out private investment in the energy sector. I just don't see that very much happening in the Marshall Islands. Given the transformation that is taking place in the Marshalls, what I do see happening is a convergence of efforts by the government as well as by the private sector. And I believe with that type of convergence taking place, there will be better opportunity, more opportunity to be able to come up with the right balance, the adequate level of funding to finance this type of project that will give better access to electricity to people, especially in the outer islands.
Thank you very much. We'd like to leave a few minutes for questions, but just in terms of wrap-up, I wonder if I could ask each of you in turn to comment a little bit, seem to have lost them, to comment on perhaps the two key issues that you see going forward in the next 3 to 5 years that are going to impact on your ability to continue what have been pretty successful programs over the last 3. So 2 key issues from each of you, and can I start from this end with Tuvalu, please? Please notice the Minister has left, so not direct comment.
Well, as I said, we despite the achievements, there is still a lot to be done in terms of rolling out a more sustainable pathway to achieve energy security. For Tuvalu, certainly that's the case. We are making progress in the area of electricity generation, but certainly not in transportation. We have to cope with, to deal with energy consumption for shipping. We have 9 isolated islands, and certainly that's a challenge. And I think also similar to what Deputy Prime Minister of Tonga was saying, we do need to also pay attention to that. Otherwise, we would still continue to rely on fossil fuels. But also to deal with I think there is connectivity with the need for ICT connectivity to islands, countries, for which there is a very pressing need for reliable energy sources to work this internet and communications connectivity. This is critical for particularly to cope with disasters and to address the implications for local communities on the out islands particularly. So the challenges are quite daunting. And I was, in fact, we are very encouraged with the support from the EU and their offer to provide more money, and I don't see him around here. His ambassadors are around, but certainly, and I see a lot of European ambassadors from Wellington here, so there is a lot of need for that partnership and cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Tonga, perhaps you'd like to comment.
First of all, I think the number one will be partnership. Not only partnership with development partners, but also the private sector. Because I do believe private sector, well, at least in our case, will play a very important role in actually achieving some of the ambitious targets that we set ourselves. It's about how we engage them and the level of engagement. I think that's something that we would appreciate having that kind of a more in-depth discussion on that one. The other one is legislation. I do believe that we need to formalize via legislation the types of policy, institutional and regulatory objectives and arrangement. We're heading towards that way. I mean, in Tonga's case, to actually having a legislation that I guess encapsulate what we want to achieve in terms of having a sustainable energy sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Marshals.
I do agree with Tonga and Tuvalu 100% that cooperation and partnership ranks way high up there. And given the cost of technology, I believe that it's important to build partnership with our donor partners to be able to, because even in the case of the Marshall Islands, we will not be able to shoulder the cost of the technology required for, say, solar alone. But in addition to partnership, I think we also need to look at second and third generation technologies that can support what we have right now. Because we have a high concentration of projects within the solar area. But we also need to look at wind as well as ocean to supplement the existing technology, as well as looking at the possibility of hybridizing some of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Niue, would you like to comment?
I suppose in the end, it's a question of determining what you're supposed to be doing by way of power or new sources of power to substitute or replace the fossil fuels that we've been using. And in many respects, we're looking at partnerships, money really, by way of partnerships, or by way of borrowing, or by way of other means that you can go to try to get some money to ensure that you can achieve those particular things. I don't necessarily see ourselves as being able to borrow money, although that's possible. So we've got to work in partnership with New Zealand and the EU, European Union, and Japan and so on, who have been helping us in the past on this.
Thank you very much. And finally, from New Caledonia, some final comments, please. Oui, très rapidement. Donc, nous, effectivement, la priorité des années qui viennent, c'est, de poursuivre les études sur la construction de notre nouveau barrage hydroélectrique pour nous permettre de produire 50% de plus que le barrage actuel, puisque nous en avons un. C'est bien entendu de voir la faisabilité économique de la nouvelle centrale électrique de la SLN pour passer du fioul au charbon. Et enfin, nous avons démarré les travaux puisque nous avons engagé un grand travail pour la création du transport collectif urbain propre, appelé le Néobus en Nouvelle-Calédonie, qui engage à peu près l'équivalent de 200 millions de dollars US de travaux de rénovation de la ville en transport urbain.
Very quickly, for New Caledonia, our priority for the years to come, first it would be mainly on the studies of this hydroelectric dam, as it would enable us to increase by 50% more electricity generated by this hydroelectric dam than the already existing dam that we have. The second objective would be the economic feasibility of this new power station I talked about for the SLN company. And finally, we have implemented and launched a great project regarding public clean transport in New Caledonia. It bears the name of Neobus, and it engages up to $200 million investment in terms of renovating the whole city in order to make this public transport, this cleaner solution, feasible and appropriate.
Thank you very much indeed. We've had some pretty wide-ranging comments, some direct requests for support, and some open discussion about what's needed over the next few years. I wonder if there are some questions from the floor. We have a few minutes before we need to close. If there are questions, can you raise your hand? And there are some microphones, or there should be some microphones in the room. Yeah. Do we have some microphones, please? Sorry, just a moment. Could you please just identify yourself before you speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Kia ora ana tātou katoto. I'm Elizabeth Wright, and I'm from the government of the Cook Islands. Before I make my comment, I'd like to also extend our appreciation to the New Zealand government and also the European Union for enabling our participation at this very important meeting. My comment, as I sit here and listen, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the leaders that we have in the front and the wonderful responses that you've made to the questions. But as I sit here, I reflect back on our own situation in the Cooks, and in terms of the fact that we have also made great strides, as you've heard from the Minister Makali this morning, on progressing our own journey towards a renewable future. But one of the things that we are grappling with, and one of the things I think that is worth discussing further and getting a sense of, and in this particular meeting, is the issue of sustainability. And we've heard the word come up quite often from the panel. Now, in the Cook Islands, we all know that we've got these, in our case, in our Northern Islands, we have 8 new power systems on 8 islands, and we're about to build 4 more on the in the southern group before it's beginning at the end of this year. One of the issues then that we face is this issue of sustainability. The cost, of course, with the renewable system shifts. The cost structure shifts from a cost structure that has been predominantly based on operational costs with the fossil fuels to one that is based on the replacement. So we're interested to know, how do we ensure, I guess, or models that ensure that come 10 years' time, come 15 years' time, when these systems need to be replaced, you know, that we have the capital there to replace them, that we are able to do this. We are undertaking a piece of work at the moment looking at governance. the governance arrangements, including, sustainability and making sure that we have these systems in the Cook Islands. We're undertaking this piece of work at this very moment. But I'm interested to know, how have other countries looked at it? Because I have to be honest, we have found it hard to change the mindset of our people, particularly in the outer islands, in terms of the sun is free. Why are you charging us a tariff?
I think a very common problem. Perhaps I can turn your question over to the panel, if I may. Are there some of you on the panel who would like to respond? Tonga.
In the project that we actually have, like with ATP in Australia and the EU, one of the requirements for any island to participate is actually to identify a local body. In fact, we actually insisted they have to be incorporated. They need to actually very clear on the financial arrangement in place, that the whole village actually buy in, or the whole island had to buy in on how to set the tariff and how it's going to be collected. So all of that are done before we install whatever system we think is appropriate on the island. One of the other one is about maintenance. We, in our case, we train one of the local in how you actually maintain the panels and what have you. And then once in a while, we have a scheduled visit from our, say, Tonga Power Limited to actually go around the islands just to do a more, I guess, more technical maintenance. But that's how we insisted that if you want to participate, these are what you need to actually sign up for. And if not, then we need to look into the next island. That's why I said not yet 100%, because some of them might not be because of the mindset that you mentioned.
Thank you very much, and for an excellent response. Other questions, please? I know I'm between you and coffee, but please. Just down here in the front, please. If you could just raise your hand there. Thank you. From Tokelau, thank you.
Sorry.
It's on. Go ahead.
Chovolisi from the government of Tokelau. Given the panel as leaders, I just wanted to actually ask a question about, we've become stronger as countries in actually vouching for funds, but as a region, is there opportunity for regional direction together as actually working towards a renewable energy goal? I think we've seen the great news from Tuvalu and in terms of actually accessing 100% for the people. But I'm just wondering, as leaders of the region, whether we have actually a regional movement and whether meaningful partnership can be actually interfaced towards a more regional approach. And then we can actually address the issues that New Caledonia is raising about accessibility and funding. This will cut management costs of these projects that we have.
Thank you very much. Tuvalu, would you like to speak?
No, thank you very much. I agree entirely with the sentiments of the question, but we do have to acknowledge that our regional agencies have also been helpful in providing island countries, certainly to Tuvalu, on renewable energy, and I acknowledge the work of the SPC and SPREP and in these areas. But we do not, as yet, as I understand it, have one single agency dealing with renewable energy, similar to what IRENA is doing at a global level. But perhaps those are the developments that we need to look at. But the ultimate objective, of course, is delivery on the grounds in island countries. And I think the issues raised by Elizabeth from Cook Islands are pertinent to ensure the usefulness of our achievements on renewable energy. The costs, dealing with the waste, but particularly batteries. We have a situation in Tuvalu where, okay, successful installation of solar on all the outer islands, but when the batteries go flat, they just litter the islands. We have no capacity to deal with this. And I think, these are issues that we also need to take account of. And the replacement is a serious issue. That's why I was suggesting partnerships based on local ownership from the beginning of initiation, dialogue, so that the community understands the implications of these projects, not simply to get solar, access to electricity, but the costs of installations, of replacement. I think this needs to be done, but should be a factor into the budgetary process so that we know exactly what the costs and the implications. And also the need for capacity building, for the training of technicians, of technology development and transfer to the islands. I think these issues perhaps need particular attention, closer attention to these as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prime Minister. There are some excellent points there, and I'm sure a number of these are going to be covered off in the breakout sessions which are going to follow. Yes, if there's another comment.
Just a quick comment. I mean, add on to what the Prime Minister stated. We have raised in other forums whether it's possible to actually have a regional facility that can provide guarantee to potential investors in the renewable energy sector. If you actually have that kind of facility, that will attract more investors, especially for small island developing states. We don't have that size. We don't have, it doesn't make sense financially. But if you have a regional facility that can actually provide some form of guarantee, then you'll probably end up with having more investors interested in us, in our small island developing states. And I think that's something that the the ministers might actually have to look into, maybe the finance minister. But I believe it's something that we probably need to actually look at, given the fact we don't have economy of scales in most areas. So it's just something that to throw in there to see whether it can progress. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. So it just remains for me to thank the panel for their contribution. I think there's been very open and honest discussion. Hopefully it's laid a very firm base for the meetings that are going to continue through the day. Thank you to all of you for travelling here, for sharing your experience. Can I just ask that the ministers remain on stage? I understand there's going to be a photograph of all the heads of state and ministers before you get your coffee. Seem to have lost the MC. No, Mac is here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mike Allen, and thank you also to the leaders. Like Dr. Mike has outlined, we are going to have official photographs, so I ask the leaders to remain on stage, and the leaders and ministers here also to remain also here to come to the stage. And for us participants, the morning tea is available now. The breakout sessions will start sharp 11:10. So please make your way to those sessions, either going up to level 5 or level 3 at about 11 o'clock. So please, session 1 will be here in the main auditorium. Session 3 will be on level 5 in the Centenary Room or Lounge, level 5, session 2. And session 3 will be held on level 3. Okay, enjoy morning tea. Leaders, please come to the stage.